Good morning, everybody. This is Scott, the Cowboy Counselor, here again today with more tips on good living, fruits of the spirit, and just general all-around hilarity. So today I'm going to take a break from the shop. For you guys that are used to seeing my blacksmithing videos, I'm going to be doing venison sausage today. And we just ran out. I generally make a lot of venison sausage. This is my probably 20-year-old handwritten recipe. You can see all that written in cursive. So let's take a look at some of the ingredients for this, some of the stuff we're going to be using. Okay, for starters, most important ingredient is venison. So I've got written on this package, deer hindquarter. It's only bloody because I let it thaw overnight. 10-20-24, one that we harvested last October. Couldn't think of what month 10 was. And then I've got WT deer hindquarter steak. That's whitetail 1024. So that's the whitetail that we ended up harvesting. And probably about, I don't know how many pounds of meat there, probably a good 3. Now I've also got some beef suet here. Now the neat thing about suet is you can get suet from your butcher for free. So if you go in and you ask a butcher at any grocery store for either pork and or beef suet, they'll just mark no sale on it. And I bet I walked away with 10 or 12 pounds the last time I went to our local grocery store. That is a lot of free fat, maybe with a little bit of meat mixed in. Now for decades, I've made venison sausage using pork suet. I've switched over to beef. I used it one time and I like the flavor a little bit better. I like the texture. So this is beef suet. And I'm going to be going about maybe a 40% beef suet to 60% venison is somewhere in there. And that's going to give me there'll be a lot of fat that cooks out of my sausage, but it really gives it a nice flavor. So I've got my knives here. These are hand forged knives, ones that I've made. I've got my sharpening stone all ready to go. I've got a video just on that. Let's take a look at some of our other ingredients. I've got onion, garlic salt, black pepper, and this is the coarse pepper. I like more of that peppercorn type pepper in there. Onion salt, sage, sea salt. I might do a little bit of cheese with some of my recipe. This is jalapenos from my garden that have been frozen probably for 2 years, and they just seem to keep forever. So I'm going to be dicing up all 4 of those. And then these are dried red pepper. Once again, some of these may be years old. I just keep them dried and I just constantly feed them into my recipes. So I'm going to be putting them into a masher and basically making chili pequeño, crushed up red chili pepper. So a lot of this stuff that I'm using here is stuff that I've either harvested or raised. Bacon grease. So the bacon grease, I'm just going to be adding a little bit of that in there for flavor. Not much since we're using beef tallow. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting meat and adding it to my bowl. And then from there, we'll be running it through my meat grinder. This is just probably one of the basic Cabela's models. I think my oldest son gave me this one. And it has been through a lot of animals, so it's really worked well. Okay, just starting to cut up some of this meat. I'm going to go with probably 1 by 2 inch cubes. This stuff that I know that I can feed through the meat grinder fairly well. And I'm just going to alternate the venison with the suet. And this is some really nice looking venison, very dark. That would have also gone really good on the grill. I almost hate to put it in sausage, but it will also taste good in sausage. Okay. Always practice safety. Once you cut yourself fairly badly, it kind of hinders your ability to move on. So now we're going to start with some of the fat. Same thing, probably 1 by 2 inch. I'm going to make sure it's not rancid or anything. I have gotten some mixes of fat that did have some rancid pieces in it. That'll destroy your flavor. Okay, dicing up my jalapenos. I leave the seeds in my jalapenos because I like the flavor of them. 4 jalapenos is going to be a little warm. It's going to be kind of spicy. If you don't like spicy, you can cut that back to a couple. I'm also going to be adding a couple of my red peppers in. I want to point out the mental health aspect of what we're doing here. So I don't have the television on while I'm working. And part of the reason is I like to be mindful and just focus on my cooking. So if we're going to talk about the four components of mental health of being bio, psycho, social, and spiritual, the biological aspect of preparing your own food, uh, making things from whole meats, whole vegetables, things that you raised, there's a huge health component to this. And now there's an economic component as well with the price of food. So bio, psycho, I would say the psychological aspect of creating your own recipes, especially when it comes to venison sausage, is you're getting the mindfulness of, I just enjoy getting up early in the morning. Sometimes I'll listen to a little bit of, I don't like fiddle music in the background or something while I'm doing this. And it's something I look forward to. This is not work for me, but it's something that I also choose to focus a couple of hours on. And I would say the psychological aspect I get out of this is healing from my week, from the stressors of my job. I am a full time counselor in addition to being a blacksmith, farrier, welder, any of the other components of my life. So, bio, psycho, social, I would say the social aspect is preparing food for your family, for others. I have people that'll hit me up and they'll ask me for my sausage recipes, and we'll talk about that, talk about the mindfulness and the goodness of making your own sausage. The spiritual would be is that we hunted this meat. An animal had to give up its life so that we could create this venison sausage. We had the camaraderie and the social aspect of being on that hunt. Hunting is not a hobby for my family; it's a culture. So we do all of our own meat cutting, most of our own wrapping and food prep, all of the things that we do. So I would say the spiritual aspect is it just moves you closer to God, it moves you closer to nature, closer to the spirit, closer to the things that are good for the soul. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to go ahead and dump in some of this. Actually, I'm going to dice up these jalapenos just a little bit more. Okay. Let's go ahead and throw that in with all the meat. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mash up some of my red peppers. I think generally I do about 3 or 4 of these. They're pretty potent. Like I say, some of these may be years old. Once they're dried, they just seem like they keep forever. All right. I don't even know what you call this rig. There's our chili powder. I'm just going to sprinkle that into our mix. It's also going to make me start hacking. Okay, now we're going to move on to the seasonings. So I'm going to go 1/4 of a cup of our sea salt. I don't think you would want to do any more than that. I think I've overdone that. And my wife generally complains that we never get the same sausage recipe twice because I have a tendency to just wing it. But that's part of the fun. So sprinkle that in. That's our 1/4 of a cup of sea salt. That feels like a lot. I'm going to stop shy of that. I think I generally don't do quite a 1/4 of a cup. So next for a seasoning, I've got my black pepper. The black pepper, I like a lot of black pepper. So I'm going to go a whole 1/4 of a cup of it at least. I'm not even going to sprinkle it on there. Probably normally I would just dump it in there, but for the purpose of doing this, and try to give you an idea of how much to go with. So that's our black pepper. I've got hot seasoning salt. So this is just a basic Cajun spice. I like this stuff for about everything, but it kind of gives it a nice kick to it. I'm going to go about Maybe not. Maybe about a half of a fourth of a cup. Okay. Garlic salt. Garlic salt, I really am just going to sprinkle a bunch in there. I like garlic quite a bit. This is actually the coarse garlic salt. That's what I like to use. You could use garlic powder if that's all you had. I'm pretty liberal with it. Okay. And onion powder. I'm just going to use, this is probably a good maybe 2 teaspoons. And that's about all I have left. I'm just going to put it all in. I like onion powder. Okay. And I also have chicken stock. I'm not going to put that in this recipe. Sometimes I'll use chicken stock to keep it a little bit moisture when we've used drier blends, because venison doesn't have a lot of fat in it. This is going to have a lot of moisture to it just because of the beef suet. Bacon grease. I don't know that I'm going to add the bacon grease. The suet gives it a lot of flavor. Sage. I do have sage on here. So I'm going to add in, I like sage. This is probably going to be about, let's say, 2 teaspoons of sage. Okay, now as far as seasonings, I also have brine on here. And by brine, I mean when I've had pickle brine or jalapeno brine from pickled jalapenos, I've used that. I don't have any of that right now, so I'm just not going to use it. I see I have a red onion here. This was in our vegetable drawer and probably just about to go bad. So this is also a great place to throw in some of the things that you don't want to go to waste. I'm going to go ahead and chop that up and put it in too. Okay, now here comes the fun part. The best way I've found to mix all the ingredients together is just by hand. I just use my bare hands. If you have any open cuts or anything, there's a lot of hot stuff in here. It'll burn. I suppose you could wear gloves. I'm just not that well thought out. Let's go ahead and just start mixing all these ingredients. Make sure we get, especially our seasonings. Okay. Okay, I've got my grinder set up and ready to go. I'm going to be going on the grind setting. Stuffing setting would be for when you're stuffing casing, which I've done a lot of too. And as I go through, I'm going to add 1 piece of meat and then 1 piece of fat. So I'm going to alternate so I get kind of a good mix between those two things. Once I turn this on, you probably won't be able to hear me anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and crank that on and we'll go ahead and feed some through. Okay, now that I've got enough ground for a couple of patties, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of test pieces. So I'm just going to go ahead and cook these up for myself for breakfast and try them for flavor before I make up an entire batch. If I've got it too hot, too salty, really it would be one of those two things is what generally happens. So I'm just going to go ahead and make my sausage patties. And from here, they're going to go into the skillet, which I've already got heating right now. Okay, my sausage is cooking up right now. And like I said, this is my breakfast, so I'm going to add a couple of eggs to this. Eggs I know are super expensive right now, or I mean, comparatively, they're more expensive than they were. These actually came from my daughter. She has chickens and ducks, and these bigger eggs are duck eggs. So I actually don't mind the poop or the dirtiness on the eggshell. I think any bacteria that you would get would cook out anyways, and it's just I like homegrown eggs. So once more, the health aspect of doing this, of using eggs that you actually got from somebody that's raising them is you know about when they were laid. And so you're not eating stuff that's been sitting on the grocery store shelf for weeks or months, or I don't know, just kind of pale in color, tasteless. I know everybody doesn't have that option, but you can generally find people in your community that are raising eggs. And if you're going to spend big bucks on eggs, you may as well give that money to a local grower instead of big supermarket chains, in my opinion. So I'm actually very hungry right now, so I'm hoping the sausage is really good. Let's go ahead and flip these. Okay. I'm also a huge proponent of cook your own food. We rarely eat out. It's so rare that it only occurs a few times a year. And it's generally when people that we know want to go out and visit. And then it's hard for me to find things that I can order when I'm out that I couldn't have just made better myself anyways. And definitely not healthy. I've really gotten away from cooking with seed oils. I'm a big believer in animal fats. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cooking. I wanted to showcase an improvement we made to our home this week. We have this, I bet I've had that elk rack, this European mount, for 30 years, maybe longer. And we had a friend of ours finish this piece of burl walnut for us. And then we mounted the elk head to the burl walnut for a centerpiece above our fireplace. They're just extremely pleased with the way that came out. I guess speaking of the spiritual and psychological component of what we do, I actually found that mount. That's not one that I harvested when I was hunting with a friend of mine who has passed away now. And so it has special meaning to me of just my youth and friendship, grief and loss, and just the things to look forward to in life. Okay, sitting here in my kitchen now and ready to give this a try. I also wanted to showcase just for fun one of my copper sculptures that I made last year. Some of you have followed my shop work that I've done as far as sculpture making. I actually made this one because I thought I would sell it, and I like it so much I'm just going to keep it. It was actually a memorial to a Mustang horse that I used to work on as a farrier, trimming his feet, and he passed away last year at the age of 42. So I've named this sculpture Buck in remembrance of him. So let's try this sausage. Get a good bite here. That is perfect. That's exactly the way I like it. It's not too salty. It's not too hot. If you come out and you don't like the flavor, if it is a little salty or a little bit too hot for you, all you would have to do is thaw a little bit more meat, add it to it, add a little bit more of your suet, and just cut that recipe a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and shut off now and enjoy my breakfast of duck eggs and venison sausage. So thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe, and have a blessed day.